Hello, my name is Sandi Park. I'm with Hudson Valley Nest and Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Hudson Valley Properties. Today we have Ellie Johnson with us from Berkshire Hathaway Home Services New York City Properties. I'm going to start out with just a little bit of a background on the Hudson Valley and where things have been at this end, and then we're going to kind of jump Ellie in to give us perspective on what's been going on in her end. The Hudson Valley has seen explosive growth that really kicked in the end of May, beginning of June of 2020. During the shutdown, it was shut down for all intents and purposes. We were really quite slow. No business was really going on up here. And then the gates just opened. We had a little bit of a Wild West situation going on from probably about July through September, where we had a lot of deals that had accepted offers and in contract, but we didn't know what the ultimate closing price was. So we had a lot of realtors working with each other and sharing this information, which we really usually don't do until deals have closed. But there was just no other way to get a perspective on whether a house was selling for 10%, 20%, 5% below what the prices were. So we did have a little bit of a Wild West period going on then. In September, we hit double-digit growth, which we've maintained since in units sold. And our median is also up significantly. But I will preface all of this by saying that we were already on a steady incline. It was a much more conservative incline, but we were already on a steady incline. February before the shutdown was actually a record February. We were up 8.9% in our median, which was a record February for the Mid-Hudson MLS. So we were already positioned for really what happened as far as we were short on inventory. We were already increasing in values and then everything hit. So I'm going to just check right now real quick and make sure that nobody else is waiting to come in. Let's see. Just want to make sure. Okay, I've got a couple people. I'm just going to let them in real quick. I'm looking away from you. Sorry. And now I'm going to bring this over to Ellie because it's quite interesting how we are set up differently. Through talking with Ellie, the MLS in the city is set up very different than we are. When I'm pulling up my market momentum reports to see how the different towns in Dutchess are doing, there's real accountability here in Dutchess as well as in the Westchester MLS as far as what you input, putting in your closed sales and accuracy. Things are a little bit, they're coming along in New York City from what I understand, and I'll let Ellie address that further. But this also goes on in Connecticut, so it's not just the city. And they've been working on in Connecticut as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Ellie and really let's get into with our explosive growth. Obviously they're coming from somewhere, and I know from my client base that we've seen them coming from the city. And I'm really curious, as I'm sure most of you are that are here today, how has that impacted the city? And Ellie, if you can kind of jump in and give us some perspective as far as just over this past year. Why don't we start out with, what have you seen as far as what's the vibe been in the city? What have you seen as far as desire to stay, go?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, Sandi, for inviting me to be on your webinar. It's a pleasure to be of service to our community. And I think we need to start by saying that New York City, when you collectively put all the 5 boroughs together, from Staten Island to Brooklyn to Queens, Bronx and Manhattan, you have a population of 8 million people. And when the pandemic occurred and there was a lot of media hype on everybody, the exodus of New York City, right? At the end of the day, when the dust got settled, there was only a 5% of our population that moved outside of the city. So you're talking about 400,000 people in a population of 8 million people. So it's like a drop in the bucket. So let's put those things in perspective, because I know you and I discussed that there are markets outside of New York City where we have had sellers that are scratching their heads and saying, where are those buyers? Why isn't my property selling? Not every community had the influence and benefit of the pandemic in a positive way. So I think that's important to note. Um, for us in New York City, we were considered non-essential businesses, so we were completely shut down from March through June, to the middle of June. So when we resumed activity, we slowly started to rebuild. And by the end of this summer, we started to see people coming back into New York City. And, just to give you a little bit quick overview of how the exodus occur and the returning back to the city. The first group of people that left the city, and I don't like to use the word fled because, yes, it is a pandemic, and yes, everybody has different thresholds of comfort levels, but it was the top tier of very affluent New Yorkers who already had second homes in places like the Hamptons or Connecticut or Hudson Valley, and tri-state area, if you will, and as far as Palm Beach. Which again, it's been so interesting to see how state from state, city from city has handled the pandemic and the different restrictions that different communities had. So having said that, yes, we were certainly impacted in the city, and especially our primary focus is in Manhattan. And we do service the other boroughs like Brooklyn and Staten Island and the Bronx, and even, communities where in the past, Queens, that we didn't service at all. And we then, the next year that sort of left the city, it was the individuals, whether we're young families or young executives that were renting, and they maybe had been saving to do their first time home purchase in the city, and they thought, well, rather than allocate those funds to the city, let's go find something outside of the city. And that goes in line with some of the properties that you have in your market area that is between the $500,000 to $1 million price point. And I think that was the sweet spot for the purchasers that you were seeing, not to say that they were outliers. And there were people that bought homes sight unseen in Connecticut and Westchester counties that were north of $2 million. So you had a mix of that.
We had a very, I'm going to actually go back to a couple of the points that you made because they were actually very interesting. One of them, the first one was sellers and wondering why their homes aren't selling. This has actually been quite interesting in this market here as well, because what I've found are sellers still in this market, in this chaos, sound pricing and experienced marketing still truly count. I have found during the course of this, I had one listing that I had to do a comp for. It had sold way over asking, and they needed it for their accountant. And when I did the pull for the comp, all 5 houses in that comp had price reductions before they sold. So in the sidelines of everything that's been going on, there have been houses that have been expiring, which means it doesn't sell during the term of its listing. There have been houses that have done price reductions. There have also been multiple offers right out of the door where, people get into deals right away. But I have seen, thankfully none of my own clients, but I have seen what I have to believe are disappointed sellers and agents to kind of miss the boat a bit on this market, because it has been a tight market. This inventory squeeze that's going on is not just in the Hudson Valley, it's nationwide. I was looking at numbers last night. Nationwide numbers are down 40% in inventory. And we're right there with it. I was actually pulling up last night as far as our numbers were concerned, and new listings, we only have 30. I'm sorry, looking away from you for a second. We were, as far as new listings are concerned, we only have 30 new listings in Dutchess County. New listings are marked new when they've been in the system for about a week. As far as active available listings, last January 2019, we had 936 listings available in Dutchess County as a whole. Right now we have 673. So we're coming in, and the January 19 number of 936 was actually down 12% from 2018. So we're coming into 2021 with the definite squeeze already in inventory. How are you looking? You know, I'm curious as far as you for last year, Ellie, you know, and the year prior, you know, how are you looking in inventory? I'm kind of thinking we're squeezing, but do you have an abundance? I mean, where are you at?
Well, currently we have over 7,200 properties on the market for sale in Manhattan. And that includes all types of properties, from condominiums to co-ops to single family homes, which are considered townhouses. And our activity has been, again, very robust. And, you know, as of yesterday, from the prior year, we are up almost 35% on our pending or under contract sales, which is north of 3,000 properties that have sold, you know, that are under contract currently. Some of those, we're talking about the last quarter, right? In the marketplace. Now, the other thing that you're seeing.
Wait 1 second on that one. You're up 35% in pending sales in the city.
Yes.
Interesting.
And I mean, and I think there is, again, a lot of misconception, and you started the conversation by talking about MLS and data. And in New York City, we are not realtors. We are part of the Real Estate Board of New York, and we have our own RLS system, which is the Real Estate Listings syndication system. And we distribute our listings to the brokerage community, and our association mimics the National Association of Realtors. However, the information that it is put into this database and distributed to the community, similar to your markets where you have different MLS for different communities or counties, we have three main players that feed information into this RLS system. However, the brokerage firms still have a level of control as to how much information is shared with our competitors. So the accuracy on our stats requires a lot of research. You have to go through different sources, and I would say I would give a margin of error of 5% or so, give or take, on different ends. But it's also important to understand that we have almost a full year of new data that has come into the marketplace. So when I say that we are 35%, that's compared from a year ago. Now, we did have a low, and when you collectively put all five boroughs together, we end up with about a 40% below our statistical sales from a year ago.
Okay, wait, let me clarify this, because
I know it gets very complicated.
All right, first of all, let me clarify who we are. Is we Berkshire Hathaway, or are you saying we collectively? Are you getting that 30, was it 35%?
This is collectively New York City, all of the brokerage community in New York City.
Okay, and so you're up.
This is not including the other boroughs. This is Manhattan, from the tip of the island to, from north to south or south to north, however you view it.
So now, you're up in pending sales.
Yes,
by 35%. Was
correct.
it 35? Okay. 35%, but now you're down 40% in what?
Collectively as a whole, from if we were to compare um, a year ago um, today, in all boroughs and in all types of properties. But over the last quarter, quarter over quarter, we are up uh,
Okay. All right.
35%.
That was my disconnect.
Yes,
Okay. So
sorry,
you were
my
talking
apologies.
that's fine. So it was fourth quarter you were up, but
Yes,
for the year you were
we were
down
down
40%.
40%. Now,
Okay.
remember that we are coming from an almost 90% down from when the pandemic began in March. And we gradually started to inch back into the numbers that we have today. Like we went from 90s to 80s to 70s, 60s, 50s, and finally, we are farther ahead than we had anticipated. And for our own offices at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, New York Properties, we were very blessed that we did two of the largest transactions in the city this past year. We had the fourth largest sale on the Upper East Side, north of $63 million. And then we had the third largest sale in Tribeca for north of $18 million, and everything in between. So, that was incredible. And this where one of the purchasers was a buyer that was renting and saw the opportunity to buy now versus continuing to rent.
That's really hot stuff. And actually, I have to say, I did forget to put up our little welcome screen. So I want to just back up for a second because, and give just a little bit of background as far as Berkshire Hathaway has 50,000 sales associates nationwide, actually internationally. Ellie launched the city location on Madison Avenue in 2017. So Ellie's got 30 years of experience. She was top selling with NRT Sotheby's and has a whole lineup of experience going on. But that's pretty impressive to, with the competition level in the city, to have two of these top major sales, only within, really a few years of entry into the city market is actually quite impressive. I just want to take a moment to horn toot on that one.
Oh, thank you.
But all right, so a couple of other things. So now we were down also, during the height of the shutdown. We weren't down 90, we were down 16%, but we had, really we were completely shut down. So it really kicked in for us as we got further into May. But I have to say that as far as the numbers are concerned, we've got towns in Dutchess County that really increased substantially in units sold. Town of Stamford is up 113%, for instance, in units sold over 2019. We do have towns also that are down. We have towns that are down in units sold. Town of Fishkill is one example. They're down 21% in units sold. And I think that we are going to start to see that more so in first quarter. I am expecting, my prediction for first quarter is that it's going to be a tough one in the respect that we have got low inventory, meaning that there's not a lot of houses available. And Westchester County, I don't mean to, I came from Westchester County. I was a broker in Westchester for 20 years or so. Northern Westchester in particular, Bedford, Katona. I'm still a member of the Westchester MLS and the board down there. So I keep up with the numbers down there too. And Westchester is, they're having very similar issues. We're all kind of aligned with inventory down. And we also have this other factor that's kicking in where sellers are really having even more trepidation about having buyers into their home with COVID increasing. So, my expectation for first quarter is that I expect that we're going to be off in first quarter. I'm feeling that way. Now, Ellie, your first quarter, February for you is usually the golden month. I mean, that's when you've got Wall Street getting their bonuses. I mean, what are you expecting out of first quarter at your end?
Like I said, we are starting the year with a very nice, robust buffer from the properties that went under contract. So as far as closed sales, I see an increase, and we are seeing a lot of activity. I think for the for us, election years have always been years where people kind of pause and wait to see who the new presidency and who's going to be in charge of the White House. And with the unprecedented events that have occurred, I think that's going to have an impact for us because the stock market it has done incredibly well overall over the past year, which I anticipate that there is going to be a lot of bonuses. So we are going to see, I think, activity, probably more so than before, because it is a buyer's market and there are a lot of great opportunities. And there are many people who, when our Wall Street reopens, in a sense where we know that the way of conducting business has changed probably forever. However, there are many large corporations, Sandy, you and I touched upon it briefly during our debriefing for this meeting, that there are corporations that are very strong supporting New York City, and they are mandating some of their executives and employees to come back to their offices. Obviously, we have restrictions of 50% occupancy. Like in my office, for instance, I can only have 17 people at any given time, and it's all based on square footage and your building, and again, the comfort level of people. And I think if these people start to come back to the city because they have to be in their offices, even if it's once or twice a week, they are going to keep some type of residency in Manhattan, be it a purchase or something that they're going to be renting.
Now, you've brought up renting a few times, and I have to say, really every housing type, Westchester, Hudson, just the Hudson Valley, every housing type is in demand. There's no doubt. And rentals are definitely not immune to the situation that's been going on. In fact, generally speaking, it's been an inventory squeeze for rentals as well. And what we've been finding is a rental comes on, and if it's priced well, it will have anywhere from 40 to 100 plus applicants for it. So the rental market's been really tough here. Now, the city is very, that's a huge segment of housing for the city.
You have to understand that the makeup of housing in New York City, up to recent years, our city is composed of 60% rental buildings and 40%, home ownership. That has shifted a little bit because there has been a surge of new development, but not enough to tip the scale. And so the rental market has always been a very important aspect of revenue generation for companies, but more important for housing for individuals coming to New York. Like, you guys have very specific seasons, right? You have your spring market, which now has shifted to different months. And, the winters were always slower because of weather conditions. And historically, a lot of people don't take under consideration why these markets were the way they are. For us, the first quarter, because of Wall Street bonuses. For you, the first quarter slow because of snow and not being able to get on the streets and the roads and what have you.
Well, I want to just interrupt on that one and just say, for this year,
it made no difference.
Everybody wants to drive in the snow. They want the country. So it's definitely not the deterring factor this year. It's definitely.
Well, I think that also with globalization, to me, being in New York City for the last 20 years, working in global markets, that ship sailed a long time ago as far as seasons, because you're dealing with different time zones, you're dealing with different, and that's a big deal. So, and different holidays. I mean, a lot of countries, they don't have the same holidays that we do. So when you are transactioning and, providing a home ownership or rentals to different countries, those borders are gone. You know, people are making those transfers any given day, any given time. And a lot of brokers had to adapt to like Wall Street's with the stock markets, right? Some people have to start at 4 a.m. because their clients are in the Middle East or they're in Asia.
Well, you bring up something interesting when it comes to the rental market itself in the city, because, when I'm looking at this end and I'm seeing that we're tight in inventory, period, rentals, and there's a mix of buyers, the buyers that have been coming up this way. First of all, one thing that has been a real big shift, pools in the past were, maybe 10%, 15%. I don't know the exact number, but it was definitely a lot lower as far as interest. And at times, when you do the comp, you wouldn't necessarily, not necessarily add in that much value for the pool, because oftentimes the pools can be a question mark. So people don't want them. They don't want to maintain them. They don't want liability issues. What I have found over this past year is pools have just gone through the roof. I mean, every person that I've worked with has wanted a pool or a pool site. They want privacy. But you also have this other market segment that's coming in that isn't fully committed yet to the country. They want to dip their feet in. And those feet dippers, they tend to be, that translates to rentals, translates to condos. Condos are flying off the shelf if they're priced well. And again, so are rentals. But, what's interesting to me is that when I'm looking at the dynamics of the city, you've got different things going on that I would think affect your market in the rental segment. If you're saying that 60% of your market's rentals.
100%.
Okay. So, I mean, because you've got the, I mean,
well,
you've got the housing and stability thing that happened in
we have a
2019.
very diverse group of landlords. And as I was sharing with you, for the first time ever, I think I have a lot of sympathy for a lot of good landlords because they have suffered tremendously, as well as the retail business, if we go into a little bit into the commercial, but staying in the residential area of rental market. There is a lot of tenants that have not paid the rent, just like a lot of people weren't able to pay their mortgages. And that's unfortunately a lot of the lower rents, people that blue collar workers and people who had lost their jobs. And because all courts were shut down and there is a backlog and eviction notices have been postponed by the government, a lot of these landlords, they're not generating any revenue. And some people are still living in those units. Other people sort of just abandoned their apartments and left out of that 400,000 pool that left the city. And they still, some of these people still, some of these landlords, they still have mortgages to pay and they have property taxes to pay. And they have other, maintenance fees, maintenance to do. So it's been very difficult. I mean, I know for a fact people that haven't paid their mortgages or their rent for 9 months,
right,
and they cannot be evicted. And you have to understand that we used to have a lot of investors, whether local or foreign, that were not commercial investors, but entrepreneurial or small investors that would come from foreign countries like China or Europe or other, and buy, whether it was one unit or multiple units in some of the new developments or small buildings. And those were very steady, robust income for these investors. Not only are they losing on the rents and the rent values have gone down tremendously, but they're also not, the value of their asset has gone down as well. So
Now,
that
this is not just, it's not just the lower end, is it really?
this
That's
is all across
because I'm
price.
seeing people come up from the city that they're buying, 500 to million, right? And they're coming from a rental situation. So it's also people that are leaving their rentals there, didn't
you have to
necessarily not pay,
That's right.
right?
But I mean, you have rent, I mean, to be in a good neighborhood in New York City and you're renting a 1 to 2 bedroom apartment, you're looking at north of $4,500, $5,000 a month.
How much are you
And
looking
that
at
is,
now, though?
and that is a mortgage payment. And that $4,000 one bedroom apartment, maybe you can get now for $3,000. But that's still enough money for somebody to pay for a mortgage on a small asset. I'm not saying they're going to go buy a big mansion, but if you look, especially with the interest rates being so low, you can get so much more for your money. So, a lot of these people that were in that sweet spot between 3,000 and 10,000 a month renting, they're saying, wait a minute, I can go buy a nice suitable home with that swimming pool and still have the same monthly spends that I was incurring in the city, not building any kind of equity for my future.
So property owners are really, they're kind of getting a double punch, right? Because they've got the lower end, not the lower, I don't want to say lower end, but blue collar and I guess the lower end where they can't
Or
necessarily
entry level, like
entry level. That's the better way to put it.
brokers in my office whose family business is real estate, and they have, and we didn't even mention all the riots and all the protesting that occur after Floyd's death, right, on Wall Street and in the Lower East Side. And I have an agent that right now her family has north of 150 units vacant in the Tribeca, Lower East Side, NoHo, Soho area, because those areas were very badly impacted by those riots. I mean, we didn't have that experience on the Upper East Side. It was like two worlds apart.
Huh. So where are you seeing the money being invested in the city at this point? I mean, are you
Right
seeing that?
now, the Upper East Side has always even flow, but it has always been probably the most steady neighborhood in the city. So you see a lot of opportunities there. The Upper West Side, again, also has suffered because of all the media hype on housing homeless people into residential neighborhoods, and that's been a very big political issue. I have friends who own a summer home in New Jersey that both in the theater industry living on the Upper West Side, and they cannot rent their apartment or sell it at this moment because they want to sit tight and they have the financial means to do so. But they actually ended up buying outside of their beach home where we are, right on the water. They bought a home inland in New Jersey, and they're sending their kids instead of private school to public school in a good school district in New Jersey. So, but again, that's the less than 1% of society, right, in New York City that can afford to have multiple homes and pay for or have empty spaces. And downtown, of course, Soho, Tribeca, they have been trending for a very long time. The West Village, before the pandemic, and even though the market has dipped, people are still, that's a very desirable neighborhood and probably the most expensive right now in New York City.
I've found the increase in concern for school districts to be even that much more so now, and especially for the northern tier of Dutchess, which would be north actually of Poughkeepsie. That's where we have predominantly, obviously, the country homes. That's the epicenter of where our our real high end sales have been. We actually had 3 sales in 2020 that beat Westchester for high end sales. But we had one that was listed, actually all And this shows you that the high end is not immune to a multiple offer situation either. But all three of the of sales over 10 million. I think we actually had a few more that slipped in there, but
you know, Sandy, like you said, regardless of circumstances, and these are certainly probably the most challenging ones that we have ever experienced in our careers, and you know, been in the business for so long, I gone through cycles of, you know, financial crisis and Sandy, you know, hurricanes and political turmoil and whatnot. But this pandemic was something that nobody was prepared for. And I think that this is where our real estate professional is most desired and wanted, because you do need a real professional to help you as a consumer navigate and be able to decipher, you know, the explosion of the internet right over the last 10 years, but more so over this last 12 months of really going almost 100% online platforms and virtual. And there is so much information that is being provided to our consumers that we have to be that trusted advisor. We have to be able to decipher and help them see what's real and what's not, right? We started talking about, I love the topic, and this is why I was so excited to join you, because I think the way you describe it, you know, will the exodus continue? No, we're still alive and kicking in New York. And we have families that are generational families, and you know, the theater will come back and Broadway will be there, and the restaurants, we're doing it, even though we're not allowed to dine indoors. Even the small little bodegas, little coffee shops, they have been allowed to expand their operations into the streets. And if you walk the streets of New York City, you feel like you're truly in a European country with outdoor cafes. And it's crazy, because we were all thinking, what are we going to do when the winter comes? And guess what? Right. We're wearing our coats and layers and boots and hats and gloves.
Oh, I've seen some very fancy solutions you guys have going on down in the city. Nice little shelters outside that are.
If I were a reporter, I would be going from street to street, just taking photographs of all these creative little dining areas that have been formed.
Really, actually quite.
They're going out and they want to interact. So, you know, maybe because I'm married to a New Yorker my entire life and I adore him to pieces. And he was born and raised in this city, so I became an instant New Yorker, you know, over 41 years ago. And there is that passion, that love for New York City, and we are resilient, and we will come back.
You know what? First, I'm going to mention that if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. I'm going to check it in a minute. So I just want to mention that. But I want to back up to a couple of things that I feel like I just want to put a dot on the I on a few things. Where are you seeing investors focusing? Where's the focus there?
More of the investors today in New York City are institutional investors and commercial investors, because there are great opportunities to acquire massive buildings and quality buildings in magnificent locations, from hotels to office buildings, retail space. If you are an investor and these are all long-term investors, people who want to stay in the residential arena, you know, you are, if even individual investors, the one-off that want to buy a single unit, but the majority of the investments are going into the into the institutional investor pool.
Okay.
Having said that, if you can again have the stability financially to have a long-term investment, a lot of people who in the past had rented, they might be considering, but because of our rental market right now, the return on the investment for a lot of these people, if they have to do a mortgage, they even with the money being so cheap, they will not be able to really cover the expenses, because you're looking at taxes, insurance, maintenance fees, and those maintenance fees, they're pretty high in our buildings, and a lot of, so I would say mainly institutional.
All right, so now you kind of got somewhere that I'm just gonna pull it out of you. I worked for the bubble and burst in the early 2000s in Westchester County. So this is not my first time at this rodeo. My question to you is, I agree, the city's coming back. The city comes back, it will come back. I'm with you, but let's talk real numbers. All right, so what are you down? What are you down from 2019 as far as, is it 30%?
That is a very complex question, and I'm going to try to not confuse the audience and yourself. If you are coming into New York City today and you're looking to purchase a property, if you are a buyer thinking that you're going to make an offer below 20%, 30%, 40%, is not happening. The deals that are transactioning are somewhere between 5 and 10% discount from today's market value. However, where the confusion has occurred is that at the beginning of the pandemic and throughout this year, people have heard, well, New York City is down 40%, 50%, 30%. But what they were trying to articulate, and I am going to try to paraphrase one of the appraiser companies that we use, is that they are down somewhere between 30 and 40% from 2015 to 2017 pricing. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
So I'm going to recap it and you tell me if I got this right. All right. So basically, New York was on a steady incline. Fair to say, until 2019, till 2020. Okay. Steady.
We were heading for probably the best year ever in New York City in 2020.
Okay. All right. So steady incline. Yeah, that was a bit of a bummer to be poised right on the cusp of spring market. Boom. But anyway, so basically what I'm hearing you say is that the pricing now in the city it has been adjusted back to 2017 pricing. Okay. And what I'm further hearing you say, all right, is that, so today I go to sell something, the pricing is going to go to 2017 pricing, which is about 30% below where it would have been today had New York stayed on its continued trajectory as expected. So it's 30% less than this record that or this high that you were expecting for 2020. 30% less, but we're not done, right? Because it's 30% less. But now, so you're saying that realtors are pricing based on that adjustment. And then from there, generally, if it's priced well, that places are going between 5 and 10% below the asking price, which in my mind, when I add that up, I'm at 35, 40.
Correct.
Fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, you also, again, we go back to pricing, right? We had a lot of property that was grotesquely inflated when we started the year in 2020. Especially the higher end was already starting to suffer in pricing because there were a lot of investors who had bought in buildings such as 157, 57th Street, and some very high-end, luxury penthouses and buildings. And those people bought during that period of time, right? Between 2015, 2017, a lot of them were getting incredible rents for their apartments. Some of them, you could easily get 60, 75,000, 100,000 a month for rent in some of these luxury apartments. Now, all of a sudden, those investors, those renters are gone. They're not there. And they wanted to put these properties back on the market. We had condominium sales during the pandemic that the investor had paid perhaps 34, 40 million for an apartment. Those apartments were trading at that 40, 50% discount. And not every investor could hang on to those assets. They had to let go. And we actually had a condominium board in Tribeca file a injunction for a transaction not to go through because the tenant, the condominium owners were mortified that their property values were going to go down so below market value. It eventually went through, but it was a big to do. And it set the precedence that, if you own your asset and it's a condominium, I'm not talking about co-ops, and you want to sell it, you are entitled to sell it. On the other flip side of that coin, just recently, as of last week, in my own office, and this happened throughout the pandemic, that condominiums are different than co-ops. And in co-ops, you might qualify for the mortgage. You might even have all the financial qualifications for the building to approve you. But if the board does not approve the value of the transfer, they will not allow the transfer to go through. And again, they are protecting their assets for a long-term type of situation. And we have seen a lot of transactions fall through, or the buyer had to come up to a higher number to purchase that asset because there was no other way for you to transact in that building. And I'm talking about $1 million to $5 million range, which is kind of entry level. And there were a lot of people, again, that were leaving the city. They were at the age where they already had their home in Florida. They were retirement age, and they thought, you know what, we really don't need to come back to New York. Let's sell our co-op. And they have lived here for 30 years. And they already have a beautiful home in Palm Beach. And all of a sudden, they don't care what they get for their asset because they own it for 30 years. So they have enough equity. That place is paid for 5 times over. And yet they couldn't sell it because the board wouldn't allow them to transact at the value that they have agreed to give this purchaser the property for.
It's a very interesting issue.
Yes,
that's an interesting issue that any journalists out there, that would be an interesting exploration, actually. And when I'm hearing you talk about the pricing, I feel like 2017 is aligning with, for New York City, is aligning with like 2005 in Westchester. It kind of feels like that. And then, fast forward a few years and, which this is all cyclical, right? I mean, we went through this under different circumstances in the early 2000s.
Sandi, I think you have a Q&A question on your box.
Oh, thank you. Let's see what we got going on here. I'm sorry I'm looking away from you. How does Hudson Valley define the luxury market in terms of pricing? Okay, that one's for me. And then for Ellie, what is the corresponding definition for Manhattan? Okay, so this same idea, and this is from Grace. I'm going to answer that live. And go ahead. As far as the luxury market in the Hudson Valley, I would put that in the 750 plus. Obviously the million plus is definitively, but I'd say this actually, I'd even come down a bit more. I'd say probably 650. You're getting into that luxury realm. And then when you start to get into the sevens and the eights, and then you're there.
Right.
That's where I'd put the luxury market in the Hudson Valley. What about you? You're in
For
a
New
whole
York
different way.
City, when you put it in those levels, then across the board in all five boroughs, you're looking at a 4 million and above. And that's like a very broad spectrum from the outliers where you have the ultra luxury crazy numbers that I've been talking about. But luxury, when you're doing statistics and appraisers are doing reports, it starts at 4 million. Then you start to see something very decent. And when I say 4 million, you're talking again a 2-bedroom apartment in a good quality building in a good location. And always remember that the value of a condominium has been trending over the last 20 years pretty steady, about 20% above the co-op market. So you get a little more for co-ops, but the restrictions are such that not everybody qualifies for them. Therefore, the condominium market started to gain more and more traction with regards to that. And just to give you an example, the price per square footage in New York City for the medium price, it's 1.1 million. So that's sort of like your entry level. That's the excuse me. The price per square footage is $1,300. The price for the sales price is 1.1 million. But that's not to say that we haven't transacted sales that have been north of these numbers. But in the ultra high end, and I'm talking ultra luxury, where we're trading anywhere between 7,000 to 10,000 a square foot, those prices have come down probably in the 4,000 to 5,000 per square footage. But your average is 1,300.
Okay, we have much different medians up here and even in
Yeah.
Westchester, I have to say. But to give a perspective on Westchester's median, Westchester's median was up 18.4% year from November of 2019. So November of 2019 was actually a very interesting month in Westchester as well as in Dutchess. Dutchess hit its high for median in November for the year at 26.7%. Westchester, I'm not sure if this was their high for the year in Westchester, but in November they hit it at 18.4%. Westchester being went from 608,000 as a median to 720,000 as a median. Westchester has not posted their year-to-date numbers, but they have them through November 30th. So through November 30th year to date, they were up for a median 9.8%, with the median price being $725,000. This is for single family homes. Now, to give you some perspective, Dutchess again actually was up further even still in November. They were up to 26.7%. We had a very marginal adjustment in December down to 26.5. So those were our two absolute strongest months in increasing median price. But at the end of the day, our median in Dutchess, and I'm sorry, I'm looking away from you, but our median in Dutchess for year to date through December was up 13.3%, which translated to a median price of $340,000 with an average price of of $424,298 at up 25.4%. So the numbers are definitely obviously different between Dutchess and Westchester and the city, but we definitely have had a very strong market, and we have continued demand that unfortunately, again, I think that in first quarter, I'm questioning whether that demand is going to be met. I personally am expecting that second quarter is actually going to be quite busy up here, but I just think that we have to get through this between the inventory squeeze that's going on as well as the fear with COVID numbers increasing and sellers
Andy,
not wanting
I
people to
have
come in the
a
house.
final question for you, because believe it or not, even in this market, from time to time, again, if pricing is correct, and we use the mindset of auction house mentality, right? And we have a partnership with Doyle Auction House, and we actually can do auctions on property, not from the distress point of view, like some of the auction companies that have represented real estate in the past, but more as a marketing strategy. How do you prepare your sellers and your buyers for multiple offer situations?
Okay, so very different as far as obviously sellers and buyers they're coming at it from different places, but sellers, it's quite interesting because the sellers, again, a lot of them are expecting to go into multiple offers. A lot of them are expecting to just kind of throw a number out there, and they get it. I have seen a fair share of gum throwing going on, which means that they're just kind of pulling numbers out. The first thing that I do with my seller clients is I counsel them through, where we are on the market. I do these market momentum reports, so I really keep a very firm pulse on really what's going on in the market. And I have made adjustments for COVID. I mean, it's the market has increased, but I've kept it in a realistic realm. And I have these conversations with my clients, and we sit down, and I had a listing in Red Hook that without COVID, it would have listed between 449 and 469. It was a 1840 classic colonial on 8 bucolic acres, but it needed a lot of work and restoration. It had an in-ground pool, hadn't been used in 5 years, but at a minimum, there was a hole, which again is coveted right now. Pools and private settings and bucolic settings, that's checking a lot of boxes, and I knew it. And I explained that to my client. At the same time, it needed a great deal of restoration and repair. So all that considered, pre-COVID, it would have been, again, 449 to 469. With COVID, I gave her a range. I gave her a range of 489, and I told her top 539 that may still get some multiple offers. But I said, that's your range. And I explained to her the importance of coming out at a good fair market value price. And basically, if it's going to go over, the buyers are willing to climb the ladder against each other and increase that price. But what I've found with buyers coming up is that they do not want to feel gouged in the middle of a pandemic. They will walk, even from tight inventory. They will walk before being gouged in the middle of a pandemic. And I explain this to my sellers, and I explain the marketing strategy, which marketing strategy for each listing is different. It's every house is different. But we go through the marketing strategy, we go through the pricing strategy. They truly work hand in hand. You can lead a horse to water with great marketing, but if you're not priced right, they're going to walk. If you're priced right, but you're not marketing to your audience, you're not getting your people. So it's this marriage between the two that really does work together to get you what you want. And with that particular house, I mean, we ended up listing that for 489. We used a different strategy when it came to showings. I accompanied all showings. We had over 50 in the course of a week. It was mayhem. I was asked after the first weekend, do you have offers? Do you have offers? I spoke with my client and I said, you know what, let's handle this differently. Let's let people have the time to breathe and actually appropriately consider their home purchase. Bring back contractors, bring back inspectors, do whatever you want to do. But we gave buyers a week to actually be able to do what they needed and submit thoughtful, and appropriate solid offers. My client got 9, and we ended up accepting a $700,000 cash deal on that house. So that is a really good testament to the fact that you don't have to put buyers in a corner and make them feel this give me an offer at the table frenzy in order to do right by your clients. This worked very well for that client. I have other clients where within a few days, you know that you've got your buyer. You've got the solid financing for them. A lot of this involves counseling. I have one client who accepted actually less than the top because we went through the buyers, and the buyer that was actually offering the most was really coming across as a shiny nickel. And the big thing is you do want them to see the closing table. So there's a lot of counseling that goes on with your clients during this process. And you're looking at the buyers, especially when you're in these multiple offer situations. You get a seller who all of a sudden has a number in their head now that's not realistic. A buyer walks away 3 days later. They get cold feet. They try to negotiate harder off the inspection than what the seller had expected. Now all of a sudden the seller's back on the market and they have this number in their head that may not have been realistic in the first place. So there really is quite a bit that goes into this from the seller and the buyer perspective. I counsel my buyers differently when we're going into a multiple offer situation, but I always give them what that, where it really should be from a comp perspective. And then I will say to them, if you're going to go over this, that's your call, but I don't want you to be mad at me a year from now or whatever if prices adjust and all of a sudden, I don't want you to feel like, you didn't do right. And so there's counseling again that's going on both ways through the entire process. There is. It's definitely it's not just an open the door type of job, no doubt. But do we have any other questions? If we have any, I don't think that we do. So I'm going to mention the Brick newsletter, which I publish on a pretty close to monthly basis, where I actually, the market momentum reports that I do, I condense and I do a newsletter. I will put my contact information up. So if you are interested in doing it, in being involved with it, you can certainly contact me and I would be happy to enroll you in the Brick newsletter. And Ellie, do you have anything else that you would like to say in closing?
I just want to say thank you so much to your audience for staying with us through the entire hour. And thank you for inviting me. I hope I was able to provide good information to welcome you back to New York City. And we certainly will reciprocate and send you business our way. It's nothing more beautiful than having the best of both worlds, right? The New York City life and that beautiful country life and scenery that I'm looking in your screen right now.
Well, actually, the scenery, in case anyone's wondering, this is the kitchen at Silo Ridge in Amenia. Silo Ridge, when I have 4 million to drop on a condo, it's going to be at Silo Ridge. But Silo Ridge is truly, it's not just about buying an estate home or buying a luxury condo. It is truly a lifestyle there. And this is actually their newest restaurant that's there. So anyone's interested in Silo Ridge, definitely reach out. I'd be happy to help you with that. But anyway, I thank you all for participating, and we will have this also. I will post this video and send you all links so that if you have anyone else that would like to see it, you could pass that on. And thanks again. And again, if you'd like to know about these future webinars, please feel free to reach out to me by email and ask to be in the Brick newsletter, and you will stay posted on progress as we go along with more webinars. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Ellie, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sandi. Thank you,
Take care
everyone.
all. Bye.